Hello, everyone. This is the Goat of Open D3 Damage slash Mau bringing you what I got wrong for Open Pisces. I gotta talk about this. I'm sorry, I have to. I can't avoid this. Also, if it's, I kind of want to do this more often because I feel like a lot of times we just say what happens in a CM and then the CM's over and then we just move on. When a lot of times, like, we can learn lessons from those CMs that can help us in future CMs, and in Open in particular, that's really important because there's just not a lot of information about Open or how to play it, and so there's sometimes where like we get things wrong just because there's nowhere that the information is stored, right? So, let's talk about some things first and foremost, right? Like, I still did great. Even with my massive oomph that I goofed on for the first, like, couple of tickets, I still got an 85% win rate, alright? And again, I need to be clear, I only did, like, one specific run that stayed with me for the entire CM. Everything else was either a random throwaway or something I'd already built, right? I was correct in that this was a massive, massive recycling CM, where I was able to use just whatever the heck I wanted from my pretty deep pool of open UMA and have some very, very good success. Uh, and frankly, I saved a lot of time on that, alright? Like, y'all kind of remember how I was so screwed, like, a couple of weeks ago with how bad the team trials were going? Well, I fixed it. Every on my team is at least S, several of them are SS or S+, and it turns out that's more than good enough to get a fairly significant score in the team trials, which is exactly what I wanted to be seeing. Alright, I am ready to continue to rake in that team trial bubby. We are goaded. And let's also be clear, I won this finale, and I need to be clear to some of y'all what that means. While, yes, I do think Open is a lot more peaceful than graded, do not mistake it for thinking that it's easy, right? Victory or death indeed. I am competing at a very high level in Open. I am routinely winning these over people who are very, very good at this game. I cannot wail on these people. I cannot numbers check them. I cannot card check them. I do not get to win for free because I have 6 meta cards. Hell, that Super Creek you see is still using a freaking Zeno Rob Roy stamina, right? That Air Groove is using an R Rudolph, alright? I cannot overstate, like, there is no way to cheat your way into victory in Open. You gotta know what the hell you're doing. Which is going to make what we're about to talk about even more embarrassing. So much of this video is actually rotating around the major mechanical misstep that hit all of the high-level open players this CM. Uh, then we're going to talk about some UMA that super overperformed and went beyond people's expectations. The single biggest all-star of the Cup, the UMA who are underperforming and not doing as well as they could have, and the single biggest oof moments of the entire CM, and the biggest oof of the UMA. Plus some weird nonsense I thought was just fun, and I thought it would be fun to include. Alright, so I'm sure y'all know. I love longs. Why do I love longs? Well, because it's really clear at a glance when someone's going to lose, right? We went through everything here, right? We went through the stamina calculations. I talked about how nervous I would be sharing this information because I was worried that, like, because I'm sharing this information, more people would be winning really well. I talked about how I knew the stamina. I did all this math showing off how I knew who wouldn't finish and who would. And it turns out everyone was wrong, including me. So, to be fair, it's not anyone's particular fault. If you go into the stamina calculator right now and you type in this stat line, the game says, oh yeah, you totally finish. But it turns out the calculator was wrong. Why? We don't know. Because if you go into a room testing right now, it does work. Why? We don't know. Why on earth so many UMA were just gassing out despite having this much stamina, or sometimes even more, right? There were UMA that were running 900 stamina, a gold, and a white, and were still gassing out and just not finishing the race at full speed and not starting to spurt as soon as the late race hit. It was, I think it's a really huge understatement to say people are flabbergasted about this, right? and we don't know why the CM was different from the testing rooms. Like, the testing rooms said we finished, the calculators said we finished, and Uma that were doing well in testing rooms were actually just dying like animals in the CM, right? So this is my TM Opera O. In testing rooms, she was an all-star. She was winning something like 50% of the races, which again, in open, you can't just whale check somebody, right? You can't just say I have bigger numbers than you. You have to know what you're doing, right? And so getting a 50% win rate on a single Uma, phenomenal. But it turned out she was just not starting her spurt on time, despite having 900 stamina. So again, just for you in the back here, more stamina than what I calculated for, because I was accounting for debuffers or being rushed and stuff like that. I was overstamming a little bit, or so I thought, right? uh, and so after the quote-unquote overstam, quote-unquote, I found she wasn't starting her spurt on time. And it's even wilder if you compare, like, the recovery rate of a single gold to her wit rate, right? Like, her top 3 rate is pretty close to the odds of what you expect her to proc, like, for her stuff at all. And when you get stuff like that as a top 3 rate but no wins, like, something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong, right? So it made it even more bitter, right? When, like, there were some people that, like, they just happened to have enough stamina on the first couple rounds. And they were our big hints that, like, okay, hold on, we need to build more stamina, right? It was really goofy finding out the first time, like, watching some of the people that I'd helped build their Uma, and, like, watching them succeed more. I was like, huh, wait, why does the extra gold matter so much? And going back and reviewing everything and testing everything all over again, we don't quite know what exactly happened here, all right? I need to make sure that's as clear as I can. We're not entirely sure why something went so wrong. To our best guess, one of the things that must be happening is that possibly rain was not properly calculated. So maybe the rain is different in the CM compared to the rain that was in the testing rooms. Or maybe the testing Uma just had less speed, and maybe the Uma that we actually sent into the CM just had a shade too much speed. But that doesn't make sense either, because even like Uma that had like only 680 speed were still like gassing out and failing to start their spurt on time. So we don't know, right? To this point in time, we still don't quite know why the CM was just so different from the testing rooms. But that did mean that we actually have some pretty clear lists on who was over and underperforming. So we do need to talk about like what that means and what that looks like. So some of you who are not familiar with Open, or really just not familiar with competitive Uma in general, might not know what a good Uma looks like, or what a bad Uma looks like for that matter. So let's talk about it. So it's not just a matter of just like, can they work, right? That's what Open is, right? Open is at a baseline, does it work? And in a lot of ways, you can make anyone a winner in Open if you try hard enough, right? If you know what's happening, if you understand your mechanics, you can make some Uma very powerful and have a very successful win rate. Generally speaking, that successful win rate means, are they doing better than the average gold chip? You might go, huh? What? Yeah, it turns out gold chip is basically always the metric for how good an Uma is in any given CM. She is literally the perfect Open Uma, okay? It's really, really tough to do better than gold chip on any given day, okay? Uh, a big part of it is just that she has this great ult that benefits from having a low count of skills, right? Because if you have very little skills, which, hey, in Open, that just happens sometimes, because sometimes you just don't have the access to all the mid-range skills, you get to proc your ult. And then because you proc your ult, you get to be in a good position. And so she is this really strange place where she's good in graded and routinely like top 10 Uma in graded, but in Open Uma, she's basically always number 1. If you can run gold chip, you should. You'll probably find some way to make her very, very strong. She's basically always powerful, right? And because of that, your goal is always to ask, okay, well, how's the average gold chip doing on NECM? And if you're doing better than that, if you're doing better than the average gold chip, then you're actually doing phenomenal on whatever Uma that you're rocking in with. So what does the average gold chip look like? Well, the average gold chip, it turns out, had like a 33% win rate this CM by itself. And you might go, okay, well, why is that special? Well, because the average team this CM had 33% win rate. And so that means that this one Uma, any random gold chip that she ran into, was probably doing as good as some people's entire teams, okay? And that's true in graded as well. In graded as well, that was also true where the average person was doing like 33% or less as a team, right? Uh, so that's some kind of a through line that you can understand. So, how do we determine what's a good win rate? How do we know it's not just like like some random sample size stuff? Well, first off, you basically don't care about what happens in round one, okay? Round one on its own, you should be just winning all the time. Like, across your entire team, you should just have a 100% win rate. If you don't, that's a sign that something's going wrong, right? Why? Well, in round one, you're thrown in with everybody. Every random showboater, every random throwaway Uma, every, like, well, you know what? I might as well just show up. Like, every person that just doesn't know what they're doing is in round one, right? And you can run into someone else who's highly competitive, but then you can see that, right? You can see that they're like, oh, they built really well, and you can accept that data. But you don't really praise yourself for having a ton of wins in round one of Open, right? Or really graded too, for that matter, right? You really shouldn't be losing a bunch of races in round one of graded or Open. In addition, like, in round one, your sample size is kind of small, right? Like, no one's had time to make adjustments or decisions yet, so you should never, like, look at the first round of Open and go, or graded, and just go, okay, this is the GOAT, right? Instead, you really need to wait for round two, or even for the end of the CM in some ways, to really understand who was particularly good, right? Like, you just need data, and you don't have that data until everyone's done a bunch of races. So at a minimum, you want to wait at least until round two before you make a call on how good an Uma really is, unless, of course, they're losing. If your Uma are losing in round one, that's a sign that something needs to change immediately. But wins aren't really a sign of anything, because really anything can win in round one of CMs. So, keeping that data in mind, it's also obviously a sign that, like, if they're losing at, like, after 60 races and they only got a single first place, that's not it. That's not the Uma that we want to talk about, right? Also, I'm not going to be talking about, like, random Oshi picks like Haru Urara. If you made Haru work in this long CM, congratulations, that's cool. I'm not going to talk about it too much, unless they have a significant win rate or they're interesting. But there's something cool going on there with what you did, right? Also, I want to make sure I mention, there was one Uma that I think, in hindsight, should have done well, but I have no data for, and that is Isekai Grass Wonder. Isekai Grass Wonder has all the tools and kit that, with the extra stamina conditions that we know that you needed, we still don't have any data on her. She wasn't very popular. She was basically no one's meta pull, right? She's no one's Oshi pull. If you love Grass Wonder, you just run regular Grass Wonder, because regular Grass Wonder is kind of great on medium CMs, and even on longs. Like, if you want to pass the motherfucker and just get a speed boost, Grass Wonder is still great for that. So there's not really a need to run Isekai Wonder most of the time, except this CM, where it turns out the stamina recovery was kind of great. But because I don't have any data for her, I couldn't begin to tell you how well she actually did. So we're gonna move on from that. So first of the overperformers is Summer Special Week, Mambo, and Agnes Tachyon. Alright, now Matekane Townhauser here is a great demonstration of what basically all the really good Agnes Tachyon and Summer Special Week builds looked like. They were their own ult, which was, of course, a recovery ult. They had at least one green, usually two, but one is, as you can see, is perfectly fine. And then they had multiple extra golds, and it didn't really matter what the golds were. Swinging Maestro was the most common, as was Cooldown. Cooldown was fairly popular. But really, it didn't really matter, right? As long as you just had extra backups for when your ult failed, that's all that actually mattered. And it turned out just having, like, a layer of a third of a protection meant you could get a lot of extra wins that you might not have gotten otherwise. Again, this is just a carryover from the extreme stamina requirements of the CM. This CM was really a deathmatch, not a race. And the first qualifier to actually turn it into a race was asking the question, does your Uma survive? And so that meant that Survivor Uma absolutely overperformed. Any Uma that had recovery as a portion of her ult greatly overperformed, and routinely got at least a 33% win rate. And as you can see here, this one got a 46.7% win rate by herself without her team, right? So clearly they're doing quite good. Now you might go, wait, aren't there other stamina recovery ult Uma? Yeah, we got to them. For example, we have Stamina Vampire Rice Shower. So I'm holding Vampire Rice Shower separately because her average win rate was just a lot higher, right? Even after round 2 started, you would start seeing some really powerful Rice Shower builds that were backed up by the universal debuffers. So you had nice natures on their team, or evil natures if you prefer, and then people were either running with Manhattan Cafe, or they were borrowing the Manhattan Cafe card, or had it themselves, right? And they were just draining people dry, is what they were doing, right? They were doing everything in their power to make sure that, like, no one else in the CM had stamina at all. And it's kind of fascinating, because, like, here's what you gotta think about, right? None of these race showers that I ran into had more than 60 races on their belt. That means that basically all of them didn't start their, they didn't get into the CM until at least day 2 of round 1. Several of them didn't make it in at all until round 2, right? And every person that I've managed to gather data from basically ran into the same thing. Somewhere between like 80% to 45% win rates, right? They weren't always particularly good. There were just a lot of different varieties of Rice Showers being thrown out. Rice Shower seems popular as the ace just because she has a debuff and a stamina recovery in the same ult, and that meant that, like, a lot of times she could just win races that she had no business winning, right? Just everyone else was dead, right? It turns out if you just suck people of all their bones and you make everyone just fall apart at the seams, you just win races, right? And again, this is just dramatized by the fact that, like, the stamina requirements for the CM were even harsher than people thought, and so when you take those extra harsh conditions and you make it even harder for people to fulfill them, it turns out you just net wins. So, this will naturally lead you to conclude, wait, is Raisha the All-Star? No, she is not the All-Star. And you might go, what? But that's a 76% win rate on a single Uma in fucking end of round 2. How is she not the All-Star? There is another. There is one Uma that made this CM utterly impossible if you weren't running her. If you weren't running this Uma, you were losing races, watching her sail by, and being utterly flabbergasted that of all the Uma, it was fucking Creek. You know who called this? Fucking nobody, that's who. There were people like me who said that Creek would be good, but Creek is definitely one of my biggest oofs of the CM, and that I just completely underestimated how strong she was going to be. And I need to be clear with all of you. Respect this woman's name. Do not call her Super Cheeks. Do not call her Super Freak. Call her what she is, Super Creek. And she is super on par for being the best Uma this CM. And we go, wait, but that's a 44.7% rate. Why is that so impressive? Well, here's what I need you to think about. In the first ticket that I ran her with, right, I didn't take her. Of those, she would have won 3 of them. You might go, wait, why are you so confident in that? Hold on, we're going to get to that, right? After those 3 wins, she would have won another 9 because those 9, I took her while running a frontrunner. And you might go, wait, why is that important? Well, because, we'll talk about that later, but frontrunners, it turns out, were a mistake this CM, and so taking them was a bad thing. Again, we'll talk more about that later. So I had a debuff air groove that was my rabbit that is normally a good thing to run in the CM, but because of Kida-san Black, it just wasn't, and so it put Creek into 5th place. You know where Creek's ult doesn't proc? In 5th place or worse. She has to be in 2nd through 4th. So literally having the frontrunner in 9 of those races that I ran her in pushed her out of having her ult. Why is that important? Because if she procced her ult, she won. It's not close. That's just how this race worked. And if she didn't win, she only lost to my own Uma. That's what those 19 are. If I literally didn't take Uma somehow, and I just ran in with just the Creek, she would have won 19 of those races. That's right, of her 24 losses, 19 of them were only to my own Uma where no one else is in front. What does that mean? This means if I account for all the factors where she would have lost, this woman would have had an astonishing 80% win rate, and I didn't build her for the CM, and I wasn't the only one. If I had purpose built her for the CM, I probably would have swapped out Focus for another recovery or an acceleration of some kind. This was an XL less Super Creek, right? Again, 0XL Super Creek still had this astonishing win rate, right? Where if other factors weren't at play, she would have, and I just ignore other people and just only focus on beating my own Uma, like she would have done so incredible. How do I know? Because, like, okay, here's the Uma she was beating, okay? This is my own goal chip. This is the goal chip that I ran from pole to pole for 80 races, 81 races this CM, okay? This is a Turf S, long S, 1034 base straightaway spurt gold chip, and this Super Creek with freaking Pure Heart and Corner Adept was folding her. It wasn't close. This Super Creek had almost double the win rate of my gold chip, and that's with the gold chip getting some stolen valor, right? It turns out having a 0.75% recovery this ult, the biggest recovery ult in the game that's basically non-conditional. Are you a pace chaser in a CM? Congratulations, you get Pure Heart to activate. That huge recovery meant that even at a low ball, I had one of the lowest win rate Super Creeks in the CM. There were so many Super Creeks that just had a better win rate than mine. The average was in the 50s and 60s. There were Super Creeks that the average Super Creek win rate was double the average win rate of the entire CM. Super Creek dominated Open. It was insane how powerful random fucking Super Creeks were this CM. Some people kind of knew, but here's the important part. None of these people that were running these high-power Super Creeks that were super winning, right? None of them have more than 60 races, except for literally mine, because I literally goofed on like what to put her with, all right? I need to be as clear as I can. If I thought more about it, if I'd really invested the time in this, and wasn't just like treating this as recycling CM, there's so much more I could have done. I could have put Creek on the pedestal she deserved. I love Creek. Creek is one of my favorite Uma. I have her on every team trial no matter what. I'll figure out some way to sneak her into my team trials every cycle, right? No matter what. I at least try every like long or medium CM. And like, okay, the Super Creek worked this time, and if she doesn't, whatever. That's how this last Creek got made. This last Creek was a holdover from like 5 or 6 CMs ago. I don't even remember how or why I made this Creek, and she was this dominant. I could have done better. I am ashamed of myself for not having put more thought into this particular Uma. I probably could have called it before anyone else and done some more. Self-bashing aside, let's talk about some losers. Oh, my Daiwa Starlet, my beloved, my darling, my sweet treasure. I hate Kia-san Black. I hate her so much. You might go, wait, why are these linked? Well, it turns out, I said before, front rows are weak to CM. And you might go, wait, but D3, I thought you run your Daiwa as a pace chaser. And you're right, I do run my Daiwa as a pace chaser. I try and preserve my Daiwa Rocket so that she does her overtake as close as possible to the late race of every long CM. And it turns out that having that Daiwa Rocket means that once you're overtaking somebody, you get a great proc that lets you just catapult into the lead and no one can catch you. But here's the problem. Kia-san Black was in this CM. And Kia-san Black was, well, not real, but common. She was popular. And even though very few Kia-san Blacks had significant win rates, it turned out that she delayed the activation of Daiwa Starlet's ult just enough that any time that there was a Kia-san Black, Daiwa just got folded, right? Her ult would either never proc or proc way too late to be valuable. And so she was missing her primary acceleration component for the entire CM and just did awful. It felt awful, it looked awful, and so even though normally Daiwa is a strong feature in long CMs where she routinely as a pace chaser will have something like a 50 to 60% win rate, like she'll be in Creek's position for the most powerful Uma in an open CM on longs, Kia-san Black just existing absolutely tanked it for her and made it really bad. In that same vein, we gotta talk about Kia-san Black. So you might remember this panel from the last Died video, right? And you might be, hey, by the way, remember how I talked about that Opera O that I had that just dominating the testing rooms, right? Well, this is an example, right? That Opera O dominating the testing CM, right? But even this fairly pitiful, absolutely terrible Kia-san Black still put up a number. She still got 3rd place. And you might go, well, she got like 10 lengths behind the leader, but that's fine. Like, she's 10 lengths behind the literal best open global player in the world. Is this a downside? like this terrible Kiyosan Black was doing well. So surely Kiyosan Black did fine this CM. This was like her CM, right? In graded, she was dominant. Well, okay, well, how about that? This isn't graded, guys. It turns out the late race is quite long, and it turns. Hey, remember that stamina problem that we mentioned before? Well, you know what happens when you click your ult, you have not enough stamina to hit the late race. Nothing. Nothing happens. You click her ult, and she stands in place because she doesn't have enough stamina to get all the way to the end. It turns out the late race was just kind of long this CM. And so in open, you had to have a very, very narrow window of what was possible. You couldn't really do groundwork. It was too expensive to build a groundwork and also have the recovery you needed to finish the CM. And so that meant that you were giving up a lot of early lengths in order to get the Kiyosan Black into the front length, which means that you were giving up a lot of positionals, and so you had to run a second front runner in order to build lengths again. But if you're building a second front runner, they're not Kiyosan Black, so they're just losing, and that felt awful. So even with a rabbit, that could feel pretty bad. Now, that being said, I'm pretty sure that if I had managed to pick up Kiyosan Black, I could have made a winner out of her. Yes, that's arrogance talking. I'm sorry. It is. I have a professional pride. I do think that there was a line where, with the right build and the right teammates, she actually still could have been a massive winner this CM. But she just kind of wasn't. Very few people were running her by round 2. I actually didn't see one in the finale at all, right? And neither did anybody else that I talked to. So that's probably saying a lot on its own. In round 2, how many did I see in round 2? I think I saw 3. Yeah, 4. I saw 4 in round 2. The entirety 40 races around on the CM, and I wasn't alone, right? I had a buddy. This is my buddy's Kiyosan Black that he was running, Jarander. He's a fairly high-level competitor himself in Open, and so he just straight up gave up because he couldn't be bothered to try and make Kiyosan Black work. I was so jealous, by the way, of the poll. It turns out just the skill cap ceiling makes it too hard to run Kiyosan Black on this CM. And while it's possible, and it's possible to make her a winner, it just takes a lot of extra effort that people weren't willing to put in. Now, does that make her the biggest loser? No. Say hello to the biggest fraud of the entire CM. Hello, Oguri Cap. Now, you might go, wait, but that's a good win rate. Yeah, it is. And you might go, oh, was it a round 1 rate? No, it was a round 2 win rate. And you might go, wait, what? Why is she here? Why is she in the biggest loser spot? Why is she the biggest loser of the CM? Well, because she's not Super Creek. It turns out that a lot of the time, the way that Oguri Cat played was, okay, well, you have 2 goals, a recovery. Oh, one of the white recoveries didn't proc. Well, I just have 2 goals then. And then you were just a regular Uma that didn't have anything special going on. Or a lot of the other times, you said, okay, well, I have 2 whites, my 2 golds, and I procced them. I got my ults, which was just another recovery ult, because it procced in the mid-race. And the distances between Uma meant that you were already in a good position, or you weren't, right? You just kind of didn't get any position off of your ult in open, or if you did, it was not important because you procced your ults way too soon or way too late. So your ult was just kind of a non-factor on a Oguri Cap, and your recoveries was just stuff that any recovery Uma could have done, and so that was kind of the thing. Oguri Cap did no better than any other recovery Uma. And in many ways, she actually did worse because her recovery recovers less than other Uma that were similarly built. So a lot of the times, those other Uma, like Summer Special Week or Rice Shower, Vampire Shower, just did better. And again, she just wasn't Super Creek. Now, let's talk about part of why I think she's consistently doing poorly in Open and why I'm going to put a word of caution on anyone who wants to run Oguri Cap or Christmas Oguri in Open, right? Christmas Oguri suffers from a problem called the wit check problem, which is a problem that's pretty unique to Open, that just doesn't exist in Graded. In Graded, you can have 1,200 wit. At 1,200 wit, you have a 90% chance to proc any individual skill. And while that's not that big a difference from 300, where at 300 you have a 70% chance, it turns out when you're trying to proc multiple stills at once, and you have to proc multiple stills for your ult to go off, well, it turns out that's kind of a big deal, right? Because that means that at the average width that you'll expect to see in Open, which is around, like, at most, like, 500 to 600 if you're really absolutely pushing it, it's kind of tough to proc three recoveries, right? It turns out your odds to proc 3 recoveries is, like, 55%. with 500 wit. The fourth one makes it a lot more recovery, where if you need 3 out of 4, you have an 84% chance to proc it. But that's still not great odds, right? Like, that doesn't stop. Like, that's not what you're gonna see over the length of a CM, right? Is 84% ish, right? Any individual race, you can still just get folded, right? You can still just not hit, and that's going to be a thing even in this upcoming CM, which is in theory Christmas Oguri's playground. Now, will that stop me from running her? Hey, I just happened to roll her off of a random 10 pull, so hey, why not? I'm gonna give it a shot for the upcoming CM. But I have a suspicion that this problem is gonna hold true even in this new CM, where like I'll actually need 5 recoveries in order to be actually consistent. But at that point, she'll be proccing her ult at a random time. This is gonna be awkward. This is gonna be a really awkward CM. So I'm really curious about what the lessons like. And I think the lesson might be that like Christmas Oguri cap won't be real and open until they raise the limits, right? And at that point, she'll be able to have more wit. By having more wit, she'll actually be able to reasonably compete, right? And until that happens, don't hold your breath. Now, hey, weird nonsense. Let's talk weird nonsense. I think it's fun, right? There's always something fun about some weird nonsense, you know? Fat McQueen. So it turns out, for whatever reason, there was an entire group of people that were just like, I don't need recoveries, I just need thick. And they would like throw in these random like 1,200 stamina McQueens, either anime McQueen or regular McQueen. It was specifically McQueen that they were doing this on. I couldn't figure out why for the life of me. But it turns out there's an entire group of just like I'll call them my commissioners in order to be gentle, right? But this also was true of like people that weren't in my sphere, that they just like seeing McQueen be thick for some reason, and so like it tickles their jimmies. And so because of that, they made the 1,200 stamina McQueen that had no recovery. And still posted wins, and it was kind of funny, because, like, if you just have a big enough number, it turns out sometimes you just finish the race and you just win. It was really goofy, because, like, sometimes it would just have random garbage stills, like medium quarters, which just doesn't work on the long CM, right? So it's, people are goofy, and I love it. Speaking of goofy shit, we also had the heavy drinker alcoholic Matakane Fukukitaru, right? I call it alcoholic Fukukitaru because her whole shtick was just having like 7 or 8 white stills and just drinking them down like every couple of seconds, and that's how she won CMs, right? Or won the race, right? Why specifically Matakane? I couldn't begin to tell you. This one I don't understand, right? It does seem to have born from a meme. I don't quite understand the meme, unlike the Fat McQueen. So I don't know what to tell you about this one. Like, it just worked? Like... It wasn't a super crazy heavy win rate for the entirety of the CM. There were no, like, I didn't see this one late into the CM, but I did find people who did see builds like this deep into the CM, so hey, if it works, right? Like, fuck it, we ball, right? And last but not least, there were a startling number of people that were running successful log S Bakushins. Now, I never recommend this, right? Because, I mean, it's kind of a waste of resources, right? Like, that's a lot of work to make Bakushin win. But I wanted to mention this one specifically, because this one specifically did something special. It did 20 races in Track Blazer. That's right, this is a Track Blazer Open Uma that won the Twinkle Star Climax. I have so many questions. I want to know more, right? Like, I want to know how this works, and I want to know how they did this. Ever since I saw this, I've been experimenting, right? I've gotten some interesting results, but I haven't gotten the level 1 ult quite yet. Once I figure out how they did it, I am so excited. I think it's perfectly possible that this could be an incredible windfall for doing open runs. If I can figure it out. If I can figure out, like, what the hell they did. Because once I do, that means I don't have to deal with people's weird careers anymore. I don't have to do the Arima Kinen gold chip, which will just randomly give you 60k fans if you get 3rd place, right? And that would make this an incredibly powerful tool for doing better open runs. Once I figure it out, I might record it. We'll see. Till then, though, I want you to just remind you that Open is fun, right? As you can see, there's some really wild stuff that you can do in Open and be successful, right? And apparently, Trackblazer, you can win with it, right? Don't let your memes be dreams. Follow through, you know? Either way, as you all saw, I have a sick, despite not having Kiyosan Black MLB and not having Fine Motion MLB or Nice Nature. Basically, if there's a meta card, I don't have it apart from Super Creek and Rice Shower Power, right? So, with that in mind, Open lets you fix your team chart, Uma, even when you don't have ideal cards. Also, this is a great lesson in humility. Humility is good for you, it turns out. So remember to respect the creek. And hey, hopefully your air groove tackles the gold shade end next CM, eh? Good luck, everybody!